Welcome, visitor. My name is Declan and I'm pleased to offer you the first part of the WoW Player's Diary. In late December 2009, the gaming website Gamasutra released its list of the best games of the first decade of the century, and World of Warcraft claimed the #1 spot. Fresh off its 5th anniversary, the game was at its absolute peak, boasting an astonishing 11 million subscribers. By 2024, WoW celebrated its 20th anniversary since launch. For an online game that's still going strong, that is a remarkable achievement. Though its golden age may have faded and subscriber numbers have dipped, WoW remains a cornerstone of the MMO landscape. Everyone got their own take on WoW, but its impact both inside and outside the gaming world can't be denied. The fact that around 100 million players worldwide have explored Azeroth speaks volumes. It's clearly a major phenomenon of the gaming world, and one worth diving into deeper. The journey is unique for every player. Each of us discovered Azeroth in our own way, feeling the highs of victory and the lows of defeat. The rush of taking down a first-rate boss, the joy of finally getting a rare mount, or the thrill of that epic item dropping, these are moments that stick with you. We made new friends, had disagreements, and sadly lost touch with some of the old gang. It might be just a game, but it's given us some really powerful and lasting experiences. My own adventure with the Warcraft universe started back in the mid-90s, and I've been playing World of Warcraft on and off since 2008. In 2009, I started the Casual Gamer blog, a place where I shared my gameplay stories, rated the game, new patches and features, chatted with other players, and reviewed both the latest and classic content. That blog has basically become a detailed record of my own time on Azeroth, and it's the main inspiration for this video series. Before I start telling you about my Warcraft universe adventures, a little about what gaming was like in Ukraine in the 90s. So, PC gaming in post-USSR country. My first experience with computer games was at summer camp in the middle of 80s. It was simple setup, a game console hooked up with a black and white TV. The game itself was equally basic, call it tennis, where two lines batted a ball back and forth. A little later, in 9th grade, our school got a computer lab with air-gapped PCs. These had heavy cast-iron keyboards, but also color monitors. We played Sabotage, controlling an anti-craft gun to shoot down paratroopers jumping from the helicopters. Computers became more widespread in early 90s after the fall of the Soviet Union. My first personal computer was Poisk, English search. It was an IBM clone with a 8088 processor. It's where I truly learned about computing. I wrote my school papers using a lexicon word processor, dabbled in programming with BASIC, and of course played games. These were mostly simple games like Arkanoid and Tetris. More demanding games like E15 Eagle Flight Simulator were too slow, more like a slideshow. The first piece of hardware I owned that could be called a real computer was an IBM clone 386 DX40 with 4 MB of memory and SVGA monitor. I have vivid memories of mastering Excel on it even before it was widely used in my scientific institute. And naturally I started diving into new games. It's interesting to know about how we got games back in the 90s. The internet was still in its infancy. I connected through a modem over a phone line. The connection was barely enough for email, some slow web browsing, and reading news boards. Downloading games was out of the question. It was too expensive and too slow. That's why most games were exchanged on 3.5-inch floppy disks. A small revolution came with the rise of affordable CD-ROM drives. Suddenly, places selling CDs popped up all over Kiev, like mushrooms after rain. These weren't just music discs and movies. They were full of digital encyclopedias and game collections. I knew at least 6 places on Krishchatik, the main street, and then, of course, There was a central media market at Petrovka, where dozens of such vendors had set up their shops. Of course, all that stuff was pirated. In wild 90s, buying a licensed game for 30 or 40 bucks was just not possible for most people. And to be honest, most shops rarely stocked this licensed stuff anyway, because there was little to no demand. That is why large game collections were the most popular. This disc might have 3 or 4 dozens compressed games, often by removing heavy things like in-game videos. They came with cracks, hacking software. Well, actually launching these games was an experience. Often half of what you installed wouldn't run at all, or would crash seemingly without a reason. That was a reminder that pirated stuff was, well, pirated. Introduction to Warcraft. Warcraft Orcs vs. Humans arrived on 3 or maybe 4 floppy disks, and that was in mid-1995. By then I had already conquered Dune 2, one of the pioneering games in the real-time strategy genre. The first Warcraft, I must admit, didn't make a huge splash with me. The plot was rather simple, and Dune 2, with its classic sci-fi setting, felt more compelling. Well, I do recall them using zag-zag orc sounds and the fact that these green creatures hailed from another world. To be fair, I did enjoy the game, and then Warcraft 2 hit the market. I bought it immediately. Well, actually, I got it as a part of the game collection. And that's when things really took off. What struck me first was an atmosphere, mainly thanks to the music. Your sound card works perfectly, the game proclaimed, and the simple, catchy tunes were a perfect match for action on a screen. The gameplay was, of course, more refined and the graphics were noticeably better, but most importantly, the game now had a proper story. For some reason, Alleria Windrana and Utele Linebringer were the characters who stood out the most for me. And then were the flying creatures and ships, and, well, the game was utterly captivating. The, dynamic gameplay combined with those powerful melodies really drew me into the plot. I played both Human and Orcs campaigns, having an absolute blast. In the spring of 1996, I traveled to Europe for an internship, landing in quiet Denmark, where I spent several months. Local stores mostly sold licensing games. Well, I remember seeing a collection of maps for Doom once, but me and my fellow interns couldn't figure out if it was a licensing product or not. Well, we explored quite a lot on weekends, venturing to different cities and towns of Denmark. In Thisted, I stumbled upon a copy of Warcraft 2 Beyond the Dark Portal. That was first and one DLC. This was before the euro came into being, and the game cost 120 Danish kroners. Well, that's about $20. After some deliberation, I decided to buy it. This was the first licensed computer game in my personal collection. And you know what? I still have it. It's a regular compact disc without even a jewel case, with a small art book and plot description serving as a cover. I came home at midsummer, but I didn't actually go through the Dark Portal until the fall. 1996 was a year of exciting game releases, with the first Quake appearing at the end of June. I got completely absorbed by XCOM at the time, and it wasn't until my vacation that I finally got around to installing Warcraft 2. By then I had upgraded to 486 DX66, which handled the game reasonably well. Things didn't go smoothly at first. The licensed add-on refused to work with a previous pirated copy. Well, I ended up having to buy a different version, also pirated but less broken. This one was a separate disc with the old cinematics intact, and it might seem funny, but seeing the intro of Warcraft 2 gave me goosebumps. That autumn was all about Warcraft. I devoured both campaigns, felt a pang of disappointment when they were over, and even tried my hand at creating some maps. Well, those maps-making attempts didn't go anywhere, so I said farewell to Warcraft for several years. But those years were far from dull. The first Diablo arrived at the end of that year, followed by the first StarCraft in the spring of 1998. Blizzard had firmly cemented itself as my #1 game studio, and I eagerly awaited for releases of Warcraft 3 and Diablo 2 as a truly devoted fan. In the early days of the 21st century, the game scene started to improve. The days of haphazard game collections were fading, and shelves were increasingly stocked with individual games on compact discs. Licensed copies were finally becoming a common sight. Another major development was the rise of the Russian-language gaming journalism. One day in the spring of 1998, while browsing CD-ROM store, I stumbled upon the magazine Navigator of the gaming world. After flipping through it, I realized that writers knew their stuff, and from that point on I became a regular reader of Navigator. I primarily got my gaming news from magazines, with Navigator in Romania being my go-to publications. There were also the FIDO conferences where games were discussed, but I still put more stock in what gaming magazines had to say. Diablo 2 was released in summer of the 2000, the year I dove headfirst into the world of RPGs. Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, Icewind Dale. Amidst this lineup of true role-playing experience, Diablo 2 felt like a bit an outlier. I lasted just 3 weeks in that whirlwind and hack and slash with minimal text and maximum loot. The long-awaited Warcraft 3 finally released in the summer of 2002. The game disc included a PDF manual that devoted a lot of space to game's lore. I vividly remember reading the story of Sargeras, the Burning Legion, and Lich King, which completely opened up a new world for me. The first 2 wars between orcs and humans in Azeroth now seem like a small skirmishes against the backdrop of cosmic-scale power struggle. The boundaries of the universe expanded significantly. The story of Sargeras' fall and emergence of the Burning Legion took the game to another level. I felt like developers had put a lot of care in the foundation for the series' future. The game did not disappoint in other aspects either. That was a time marked another significant leap for the computer games industry. The era of sprites and isometry was passing, and 3D engines were becoming the new norm, radically changing both graphics and hardware demands. Warcraft 3 was developed in parallel with World of Warcraft, and it was Blizzard's first game to use a 3D engine. In early RTS games, most races were almost identical, often different only in unit colors. With StarCraft, Blizzard managed to balance 3 new races, a major step forward for the genre. Warcraft 3 took it even further, offering 4 distinct races, among which the Night Elves were my personal favorite. Just like the previous games, I completed the Warcraft 3 campaigns and its expansion, The Frozen Throne, with a great enthusiasm. The setting cemented its place as a favorite fantasy universe, right alongside with the Middle-earth and Dune. Pirated WoW and the licensed Battle Chest. In December 2007, I was shopping Media Market Petrovka. Well, I can't quite recall what I was looking for, but vividly remember that what I ended up buying, a pirated copy of the World of Warcraft. The seller, I recall, warned me that it was a poorly cracked version and likely wouldn't be playable. As an experienced gamer, I scoffed at his words, though I must admit he was right. The disc contained the last vanilla version. Well, after managing to install it, I launched the game and created a human warrior. What followed was a string of broken quests, a missing skill trainer, and a desperate run from Elven Forest to Stormwind. After wandering around the deserted capital, I decided to check out other locations and created a new warrior. This time, that was a dwarf. In his starting area, there were human quest givers. Scratching my head, I quit game and realizing that this pirated version was a no-go. But I had made up my mind. I had to try the real game. After the new year, I browsed the internet to understand where to start. The result? I needed to get my hands on a battle chest. Back in early 2008, this set included the original game, the Burning Crusade expansions, and 2 menus. So, at the end of January, I headed back to Market Petrovka and bought the box along with a 60-day time card. From my research, I understood that you needed an active subscription to even launch the game, after which you could unlock an additional 30 days of playing time. Well, that time cards deserve a moment of its own. I already had a credit card, but it didn't allow for international transactions, and Blizzard wasn't accepting wet money at that time. From sellers on Petrovka, I discovered a convenient payment method – time cards. They were sold right there at the market without issue. It was essentially a scratch card similar to those used for topping up mobile phone accounts, with a picture of Night Elf on the front and a code hidden under the protective film on the back. The card was even packaged in a jewel case. Looking back, it all makes me smile. Later, after I start playing, I always kept a couple of time cards in reserve, just in case of exchange rate fluctuations. Remember, this was 2008, when the only servers available were in Europe. The game wasn't localized until August, Russian localization, but even then I didn't convert my account and continued playing for the European price. Despite buying the game in January, I stuck with EverQuest 2 for another month and a half. The game was paid for and I was enjoying it well enough, so I wasn't in my particular rush. Another month and a half passed before I finally stepped into Azeroth. So, this is all for today, the continuation of the, story of my adventures in the next video. Thank you very much for your attention. See you, bye.